Hello and welcome to the Next in Line podcast, where we are helping to prepare you for whatever is next in line. As always, I'm your host, Chance Pitts, and I'd like to thank you for tuning into this episode. Guys and gals, welcome into another episode of the podcast. Really excited to have you here, really excited to have my guest, and I'll get to him here in just a second. But before we dive in, let's make sure we take care of the housekeeping. If you receive value from this episode or any other episode of the podcast, we would ask that you share the show with like-minded individuals who might be able to receive that same kind of value. That's the number one way for us to grow and to reach a larger audience and, in effect, reach more people, which is our goal. Additionally, guys, you can interact with us on whatever platform you find yourself listening on, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube as well. What that looks like is like, comment, subscribe, leave us a rating or review, anything like that. That's just going to help us pop up earlier in the search bar when people look for personal development and self-help type podcasts. Now, also, you can keep up with us, all the crazy stuff we got going on, like what we did this weekend on social media. That's at Next in Line Development on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. But guys, now that we got all the housekeeping out of the way, I'd like to welcome in my guest. If you're watching, he's sitting here right next to me in the hotel room as we do this podcast, Mr. Lane Divin.
How's it going, man?
Welcome back into the podcast.
I know, man. It's a pleasure to be back. I sure appreciate it.
For those of y'all that don't know, episode 56, we had Lane Divin in. We did a little interview, I think leading up to right around the time of the 100K?
100K time frame? Yeah.
So right in there.
Yeah.
But it's been a little while, so it's cool to have him back in here. He just did something really, really cool. Do you want to tell them what we were in Dallas doing this weekend?
Man, we had our Dallas Spartan Ultra going on this weekend.
And what is a Spartan Ultra?
So the Spartan Ultra, that is a obstacle course, 50K. So we had 60 plus obstacles. It's supposed to be 50K, 32 miles, but we came short just a little bit, 29. So I think 29. They shorted us. So, but it's a good time.
Yeah, it's still a hell of a thing to try to do. Go out and run 29 plus miles and do 61 obstacles. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced. And you'll have to, I know Lane keeps clearing his throat. I'm going to be doing the same thing as well. No, I just wanted the allergies from the dust and the cedar and all that crap was intense. We were out there for 8.5 hours. Yeah. So we're both a little bit kind of congested, to say the least. But man, so what does your prep look like for a Spartan Ultra Marathon?
I think it looks, different for everybody. For myself, this was not only my first Spartan race, but it was also my first Ultra. I just kind of dove off into the deep end on it. So.
Yeah, no floaties.
No, I just went ahead and went all in, man. But, for me, there was a training program that I'd been trying to follow the best that I could. So 3 days a week I was running. Initially, it's how it looks. So Mondays were my speed work days. I'd have 2 mile repeats for a total of 6 miles for time. On Wednesdays, it was a moderate paced, mid-level run, anywhere from 8 to 10 miles is what that plan had it laid out as. And then I had one long run throughout the week. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, those were my body weight strength days, which are vitally important, even more so than I really realized.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think that's kind of one of the big things that really surprised me for this race was that there's a huge difference between, like, gym strength and, like, lifting heavy and stuff like that versus, like, body weight functional strength. Like, it's insane, the difference that's there.
Agreed. It's kind of crazy whenever you really dive into the whole getting through the obstacles and what that looks like, because you are physically very, very strong. You're a very stout individual, and I think with that training schedule, it probably was a pretty good point in the right direction, and it seems like it had you pretty prepared for everything that you went up against. I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, it did. And I wish that I would have been able to kind of follow it a little bit better. As you're aware, I had some IT band issues throughout the entire training period.
Oh, yeah.
So what I ended up having to do is break up my mileage instead of just on those 3 days where I was running 6 days a week instead, with Saturdays still being a long run per se, and then just breaking up that mileage throughout the week to help out my IT bands. Because I'd make it like 4 miles, and that sucker would just start hurting pretty bad. Get super irritated.
IT band is a real common issue for anybody running endurance and putting up a lot of miles during the week. So if you do decide to do that, that's something to look out for, of course. But I'm glad it seemed like you told me yesterday the IT band didn't really play a factor in this whole
Surprisingly,
race.
Surprisingly. Yeah. I mean, knees probably felt the best out of everything else yesterday.
See, that's really good. I'm glad you didn't have to deal with that on your first one. And man, you were preparing for basically a 32-mile race. Ended up being 29, but prepping for a race of the 50K ultra caliber, what was your longest run?
So, again, I was having some IT band issues. My longest run prior to this ended up only being 15 and a half miles. Had I been able to follow that training regimen, to a T, I would have maxed out at like 23, 24, somewhere around there. But yeah, I mean, prior to this race, only 15 and a half. So.
Okay. And you, for the most part, it seemed like you were pretty prepped up. You faced a lot of common issues that people face during their first ultra marathons, just not being used to the whole process. It's kind of like the old Mike Tyson saying that everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face kind of thing.
Absolutely,
and then,
man.
The nutrition falls behind, the hydration falls behind, the salt, all those things. And it never happens the way it's supposed to. It happened to me in my first ultra, and you start fighting cramps and all the other demons that you get to face out in the race. But, man, leading up to it, kind of prior to it, all the way from registration the day before, because we had to register the evening before, all the way up to the start of the race, how were you feeling? Like, what was going through your head? What was some emotion you had going on?
I never really got nervous per se. I think just because, registration the day before, like I was just like, okay, like cool, we're just getting registered, no big deal. The morning of, because we were running behind, like we didn't have that lax time to like sit there and think, because we got there late, we got our drop bags in, and then we were lining up. So there really wasn't a whole lot of time to just be sitting there, worrying about anything.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, it was just kind of surreal in the moment. And before I knew it, we were out there running, and I was like, I did reflect back, probably like mile 3 is like, dang, here we are actually doing the dang thing. So
yeah, you prep for something for so long, and then just find yourself actually out there doing it. It's kind of, like you said, really surreal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, back whenever I was training during those long runs, there's many times where I'd reflect. I'd be like, there's going to be this moment where you're actually in your race, and like that's your test, right? And so whenever we were out there running together racing yesterday afternoon, like, there's a couple times I reflected back, like this is your time to like go forth and get everything you got. So
you said something during the race that really caught my attention, and it kind of just made me take a step back. And it was whenever we were carrying these 60, 70, 80-pound sandbags out there, and we had to go on a loop and run up hills and do all these things. And I was kind of, at one point, I was just like, man, this is tough. This is ridiculous, running with a sandbag around this loop. And you said we used to do this every single day. And what you meant by that was both of us had lost a significant amount of weight. We used to carry the same weight that was in those sandbags around in body fat on a regular freaking basis. And for that realization, that was something that stuck with me throughout the whole damn race. It changed my perspective of everything, and that kind of put everything into well, what can come our way that we can't beat? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because I mean, once we got those sandbags dropped off of us, you're like, dang, like I feel so much lighter. That's when I said, I was like, man, like what's crazy though is, that's how much we used to weigh.
Yeah,
so.
it was wild.
Yep.
I mean, there was a lot of great reflection and great moments like that out there, but that was
for sure.
That's one that stuck with me really, really tough. And you mentioned talking about the early miles of that race. Through that first loop, it was kind of, because you do the loop twice. You run the same, pretty much the same loop 2 times, hit the same obstacles. So through that first loop, what was any learning experiences or anything? Because that's when you're really getting the new feeling of it all. You're hitting the obstacles for the first time. You don't know what to expect. So what were you experiencing all the way up to the first half of that race as you were going through and finding new obstacles, new course navigation that you didn't know about?
For me, I think those first few miles we were just kind of flying. And everybody's out there. You're in the heat of the moment. Everybody's just gunning for it. It's pitch black outside. You just running by your headlamp, and you're just kind of cruising. And then probably about 3 miles in, the sun starts to rise up a little bit, and there you were, like, hey, you should probably start taking something. Like, oh, yeah, I'll be good, man.
Yeah.
And very quickly, I got behind on my nutrition. It's a big learning point for me.
That was, honestly, just in my opinion, that was probably one of the biggest learning points, even more so than the obstacles and running through all of the hard terrain we were in, because it's rolling hills of Granbury, Texas up here. Yeah. But, man, it's tough. It is. You got to remember, guys, you're out here and how many calories did you burn during this race?
5,800.
I did like 4,300 according to my watch or something like that. So that amount of calories you're out here burning, you've got to put all kinds of stuff back in your body, from electrolytes to calories to carbs. And there's great scientifically evolved formulas of different mixtures of supplements for you to be able to do just that. But the thing is, whenever you're out there running and your heart rate's high and everything's not going to plan, the last thing you want to be doing is trying to put things in your body that are going to upset your stomach. They're going to bother you. You're going to be sitting there burping and feeling like you're going to throw up.
Well, and the other thing too is like, okay, yeah, I'll take down this goo gel real quick. But then you're sitting there choking on the goo because you're not taking down your water like you're supposed to.
Yep.
And
everything's dry.
Yeah. No. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is, like, I truly learned, like, how important or how vital that nutrition aspect is. Because whenever you're out there just road running for your training, you're just like, it's not a big deal because you're present in the moment. You're just thinking about it. You're not worrying about racing or the obstacles or tripping and falling or anything like that. And no, it's just completely different being out there and actually doing it. So
yeah, no, it was, man. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a good change of pace for me because it was different from the ultra running in the sense that there was kind of an interval breakdown. There was a break in the running. I feel like ultra running, you just go out there and you just beat your head against a rock over and over, trying to make yourself go through the motions of running just for 6 hours straight or whatever it would have been. So the obstacles were a nice break in there to get some actual different kind of motion, different kind of exercise for me. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. One thing I did want to ask you, when did the cramps and some of those issues kind of set in mainly? Was that really close to the halfway mark, or was that earlier?
I think that was just prior to that halfway mark. Because we were on that Z wall, and that's when my calf started cramping. And I was literally up on that wall, stuck on there. My calf was cramping pretty bad.
I remember that.
And, so that was about halfway through. And then, from then on, like, that just really, set the tone for that nutrition aspect. I was like, okay, I got to start making sure I'm taking my salt pills, actually drinking my electrolytes, going through drinking water, all of that good stuff. So, yeah, probably that halfway mark was where we were at on that.
And going into the halfway mark, so the way this is broke down is it's 2 loops, like I mentioned, repeated. You get a transition bend where you pretty much have to be self-sufficient in this race. You have to pack everything in with you in your hydration vest or your pack or whatever it is. And then you get a halfway point of the race. You get to go in and restock yourself, essentially, with your own drop bin bag before you have to go out for the second loop. So at that halfway point, whenever you were right there by the finish line, not that you would have done this, but there's a lot of opportunity to quit in that moment because you're right there at the top. You don't have to go back out. But if you're going to finish the race, you got to start that second loop. How were you feeling in that moment whenever you were right there at the start? You had all your drop bags. You were, dare I say, going through some pretty dark times with the cramps and some things you were battling within that. So run me through that. What were you feeling at that transition point, the halfway point?
I mean, again, it's just start off with going into these things like you can't have quitting as an option on your table, right? You got to completely remove that wholly from your mental game, just completely. So going into it, into that transition area is kind of it's just kind of a moment for me to be able to reflect back on where we were and where I was nutritionally and everything. And there wasn't much time where man, it really wasn't. It's just kind of a time for me to just take a second, take a breath, and just it's just kind of like a mental just like reset.
Yeah.
Just a chance to just continue pushing forward, I guess. So
I mean, around that point, was there ever the thought of? I mean, I know you said take quitting off the table. Was there ever that thought of quitting?
No.
In the race?
No,
you were going to finish it?
Yeah, regardless. I mean, whether I was going to be drug across or walking or running across, like that's just never an option. Like that can never be an option. Especially if you want to go through something like that. You just can't have that. Just can't have that as a choice. So
yeah. No, I think that's kind of what me and my dad run through as well whenever we get into these ultras and we talk about, I'd rather die than be not finishing this race today. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather somebody take me out on a stretcher than give up moving forward on my own power. And
absolutely.
So I know exactly what you mean by that. And man, I guess as you're moving through that and getting closer and closer to the end on that second loop, and you're fighting those cramps and you're at just kind of, I would say that, not stealing from any questions I have for you later, but was that kind of the lowest point out there on that second loop, or was there a different point that really struck you? Or
no, I mean it's probably mostly just getting through those cramps because there's many times where if it wasn't, we'd make it like 150 yards and my quads would just start seizing up and cramping. If it wasn't my quads, then it's my calves, and all just reflected back to that nutrition aspect of it. But it's the other thing too is like it's just a temporary pain. Like your calf isn't gonna be cramped up for the entire day or for for a week or anything like it's just gonna last a couple minutes. So it's just staying present in the moment, realizing that, and just working through that process. So.
Absolutely. And man, seeing you battle through that was crazy inspiring because I've been at that point with the cramps. I've been there where I felt like I couldn't move, felt like I couldn't get any ground made up, and it was just going to be a slow, just kind of gruesome crawl to the end. And that's not an easy thing to overcome. So seeing you mentally fortified enough to keep pushing through that was freaking cool.
I appreciate it, man. Thank
Absolutely,
you.
Man. It's really inspiring for me to get out here and be able to do these things and experience these things with you and with others, and just it's a blessing in its own because it teaches me so much.
Yes, sir.
And man, I guess go ahead.
I say, but on that point, like, because I know that you also had a couple low points yourself with your ankle and stuff like that. So
yeah, about the halfway point, my ankle was really, really giving me fits, so I just popped some Tylenol. But it's one of those things like we talked about. You say don't said take quitting off the table, and another thing that Chad Wright, same guy that said that, says don't give your pain a voice. So I just don't talk about it, don't think about it, take something to help kind of alleviate the pain, remove the focus from it, and just focus on the positive, one step at a time. I know we said it a million times, kind of that how do you eat an elephant, like my dad, Billy Pitts, I know you're listening out there, always says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. It's the same thing. So just pushing forward and grinding through that.
Absolutely. And I think that also kind of ties into like who you surround yourself with out there on the course. Because there are some negative people out there, man. I tell you what.
You ask them how they're doing, or one little thing, you start a conversation, be like, "You're doing a great job," and then it just, "This sucks," is what you hear from them. It's just negative downward spiral, and yeah, you can't let yourself get drug into that crap.
No. So,
man.
But yeah, brother, what were some takeaways for you just overall.
And some takeaways for me. I really like the style of that race. I like that it was something different than I'm used to. I'd like to go out and really train for one of these, right? Because I mentioned in the previous video, the pre-race podcast, that my training was not what it needed to be for something like this. But we essentially had a really good race. We were able to get through it with minimal injury or anything like that. But I really like to see what it would look like going out there and competing with a full tank, with full preparation, with everything being best case scenario that I could do leading up to a race like that, and seeing what I could do.
For sure.
It made me feel really good coming off of, I ran the 100-miler 2 months ago, and I really didn't do many runs in between now and then. I was still able to come out here and do 29 miles pretty handily. My ankle did give me some fits, but it felt good knowing that I still had that in the tank, both physically and mentally, to be able to drive and push through that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of ties into, one of the biggest takeaways that I had, and it's something that you always hear, is that it's all a mental game, right? Yeah. It's all a mental game. And again, depending on what you surround yourself with, like that's a pretty common saying that you always hear. But like this was an opportunity that allowed me to like truly learn that, right? And just staying present in the moment and just working through all your difficulties and just pushing through, man. Just staying positive. So that's probably one of my biggest things, just that mental game aspect and staying present. So.
Absolutely, man. That's huge. That's something that ultra running has taught me, and it kind of gets pounded back into your head whenever you go out and you do races like this, and you get to experience things like this. It just comes back to the surface. You get to experience it, and that's why I love doing things like this. We talked about it yesterday. Actually, I was like, now you probably understand a little bit more why I do these long races and these crazy things and all these crazy experiences, just because it's a different level.
Yeah, I mean, because whenever you actually go do something like this, you're able to relate to it. So it puts that perspective just in a new light for you. And not that there wasn't a lack of respect before, because anybody that you talk to that runs, crazy distances, you're like, oh, that's pretty wild. But it's like a newfound respect, because those troubles that you go through, all the different little things that you have issues with. Anything from like wet feet, it freaking sucks. To just maintaining your nutrition and everything else, and most importantly, probably just staying committed to yourself and the goals that you set, man, and just sticking through it and seeing it through to the end. So.
Yeah, no, man, absolutely, and it's been really cool seeing you go through that process, even on the preparation side, leading up to a race like this. It's just been really cool to be a part of that process and witness it all, man. And I guess all this build up and all this craziness leading up to this event. So whenever you finally came around to the end, whenever you finally made it through those last two tough obstacles, because they had two tough obstacles right at the end, and you were able to jump across the fire and cross the finish line, what was the feeling that you experienced right there? How did you feel mentally, just emotionally? What was going on?
Dude, I didn't know what to think. It was like damn, like I actually did the dang thing. Like, for me, something important, through, just not 75 hard and the live hard processes and doing something like this, it's like you have to set goals that intimidate you to continue progressing. And
absolutely,
setting a goal like this, where I'm more of a gym rat. I like lifting. But doing something that's just kind of out of your norm and something that scares you a little bit, and just seeing it through to the end, like that was something that was pretty awesome. And so just crossing that finish line, and just being like, damn, like I actually did it. It is just pretty freaking awesome. And I'm still processing quite a bit of it. But yeah, man, I mean,
it's an experience like no other. I know there's a lot of people that get emotional when they cross that finish line, just because it's like, holy crap. I know I have my first 50K, and then also my 100-mile race.
100-miler, yeah.
And then I've got some good friends that have experienced the same kind of things. It's just, there's no way to describe what kind of comes over you as a whole whenever you finish a race like this. It's really hard to describe from the inside looking out, and it's hard to understand from the outside looking in. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
But man, along with that, now that you're finished and you're done, you had some good recovery meals to celebrate and everything.
Big old steak.
Yeah, some good calories and some carbs in there. Man, how do you feel today? Physically and mentally, how do you feel today?
Mentally, I'm pretty solid. I slept. I didn't sleep the best last night. Sleeping was pretty rough, which is something that you told me is probably going to be pretty bad.
Yeah, it's very typical.
So body wise though, I am pretty sore. I got some injuries, I guess. My toes. Those are completely black.
Yeah, black toes. No toenail needed for this or toenail paint needed for this Halloween coming up.
No,
Lane Divin.
Those are completely gone. So,
yeah.
But no, I mean, like, I didn't quite know how I was going to feel, and I will say I don't feel as bad as I thought I would.
Mm-hmm.
But just stiff overall. Really, that's about it.
Absolutely,
which is expected
for sure.
So.
And yeah, for me, it's a lot of the same. I'm not near as sore as I thought I was going to be. My upper body and everything, getting into the obstacles and some of those cool things like that we don't usually do in ultra running.
Dude, yeah, no, you're a freaking beast though, man. Getting through all those obstacles.
Man, it was fun. It was fun. I appreciate that, and it just there's a lot of nuance for me and a lot of understanding that hey, you're capable of doing a lot more than you thought. Because there was a few of them that going into them, I was like, man, I don't know how anybody does these, and then I got on there and I was like, well, it comes down to you deciding whether you're going to do it or not in some ways. Sometimes you get on there and you slip, or you have an issue here or there, or conditions aren't right. But I figured out in this one, for me, it was you're either deciding that you're going to do it or you're deciding that you're going to quit. And that was my biggest thing. There was a couple times on like the upside down rope climb.
The Tyrolean Traverse.
Yeah, you had to hang upside down from the rope and shimmy down to the other end and ring a bell. It was probably like 50, 60 feet or something like that. It was pretty good length. Yeah. Doing that one was really, really tough because I had never done anything like that before, and it took a ton of upper body strength along with working your legs down appropriately, figuring out a lot of technique, and you get tired hanging there, and it came down to that I'm going to either grind it out or I'm going to just drop off of here and call it quits, and figured out how to make it happen. You know what I mean?
Was that your least favorite obstacle, or where did you place that one?
Man, that probably ended up being, by the time I got around for the second loop and did it the second time, it probably became one of my favorites pretty easily, if not my favorite, just because learning the technique, and by the time I got to it the second time, I was like, I'm not going to go through that process of hanging upside down for way too long again.
Just hanging.
Yeah, so I just started hooking my heels in over the rope and just
bringing it on down.
Yeah, opposite leg with the opposite arm, and just vice versa, just moved down it real quick and got it done. But man, that was pretty fun. What about you on your obstacle? Was there a favorite for you? Maybe a least favorite?
I think my favorite was probably the Atlas carries, just because I was kind of built for it.
Yeah, no problems there getting those things grinded out, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, so for me, Atlas carries is probably my favorite for sure. Mm-hmm. Probably my least was yours, the Tyrolean Traverse.
Yeah.
That was just rough for me. And then one that surprised me though was the rope climb. I was able to knock that out in the dark first go around. It's the first time ever doing a rope climb like that, and it just surprised me. So it was a good time.
That was pretty cool, man. And the rope was it was pretty tough. It really was.
Yeah.
Especially coming back through that second time with your arms being tired already. You just physically being tired, maybe behind on nutrition. I think we both were at that point.
Yeah.
Actually.
It's like burpees were the worst though.
So for those of you that don't know,
burpees are the worst.
If you miss an obstacle in a Spartan race, you've got to do 30 burpees, which is not fun in its own sense. So, the burpees were probably pretty rough too. Man, least favorite for me, obstacle wise, was probably the sandbag carry or the bucket carry, just because it was. To me, like, it's going to sound stupid, but it feels like whenever you've got all of the groceries on your arms, and you're trying to make it all in one trip from the car to the house, and but now change it to like a quarter mile or like
Dude, yeah,
a third of a mile.
I think with the buckets, it's just awkward, right?
Yeah.
Because the sandbag, like you're able to place around you where it's a little bit more comfortable.
Yep.
But no, those buckets were just a little awkward. So
they were.
Don't blame me.
Yeah, it got me a little bit, and man, it was a real good time though. I had a great experience out there. I know you did as well.
Absolutely.
Unlike anything I've ever done.
Yeah. No, same, man. Same.
Man, we did talk about your lowest point with the cramps and all the craziness going on with that, and the desire to have to push forward within that. But what was your favorite part of the race? Was there like a point that you just loved about it, or kind of surfaced above the others for you?
I mean, not particularly. I think it was really just the race in general. Like it sucked in the moment, but it's also like the entire test itself was just like this is what you're out here doing. Like this is why you're here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so just going through the process, just in general. I don't know. I think that's just the process of it.
Absolutely.
So.
And man, being somebody that decided to do a Spartan race, but not only decided to do a Spartan race, decided to do the most gruesome version of a Spartan race on your first time, and just diving into that process, there's probably someone out there listening that is trying to decide to do something, whether it looks like a 5K, whether it looks like just starting to go for walks, or whether it looks like going and doing a Spartan Ultra or a marathon or something crazy, but they're probably just still on the edge, not quite sure they want to do it. Would you have anything you would say to them?
You know, kind of like what I reiterated in the last podcast I was on. You know, you just gotta don't be afraid to start. Like, just go out there and just start. Like, that's probably the hardest part is just getting out the door and just getting after that process.
Absolutely.
That's probably the most difficult part. And you know, whatever commitment you decide to make sure you just see it through. Hold that to yourself. Hold yourself accountable, and you know, no compromise. So just get after it.
Absolutely. And man, we're both wearing our Spartan shirts today.
We are, man.
Our Ultra Finisher shirts. That's one cool thing we got out of the backside of this race whenever we finished it. Another was actually we got the Spartan Ultra belt buckles as well.
Yeah.
Pretty neat little prize. That's
really
going to be something I definitely put up on the trophy shelf, and super excited about doing that.
Sure, man.
But man, along with that, you know, there's one question I've got to ask you since you're here.
I do.
What is next in line now that you've done this Spartan Ultra?
It really irks me that we didn't hit the true 50K mark. So
yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe a true 50K is what's next.
Okay.
Looking at that. I'm looking at a few other things I've been checking out. You know, might be going down the heavy lifting route again. Might look at some competitions with that. You know, we'll just have to see where the Lord takes me. But
absolutely,
as of right now, not hitting the true 50K kind of irks me a little bit.
Yeah, I told Lane during the race, I was like, "Hey man, if you want to, we can go run a couple more miles after this, and we can get you a true 50K." And he said, "Hell
I said,
no."
Hell no.
So we'll just put that out there. The option was there, but no, it was a long 8.5 hour day, and I don't think I would have probably made it through the next 2 miles. So I'm with you 100%.
We would have hobbled through it. It's all good.
Yeah, just one step at a time, right? Just
Absolutely.
like the elephant.
Yeah.
Oh man, but that's all I've got for you today, sir.
Man.
I appreciate you taking the time to one, include me in your Ultra Spartan race up here in Granbury.
Brother. I mean, I couldn't have made it through without you. Like you're such a huge help through that.
That means a lot to hear, but I don't believe that at all. You are a very driven person, and I think you would have had it, man.
Well,
sure.
We at least got through it a lot quicker. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, man, you did a heck of a job out there.
But no, man, I appreciate you having me back on again. I look forward to the next time.
Thanks for being on here, man. And
absolutely.
Yeah, there will absolutely be a next time. So,
yes, sir. All right, man. It's a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Guys, thank you so much for checking out this episode of the podcast. Another great one with Mr. Lane Divin. If you haven't done so, I highly encourage you to go back and check out episode 56, where we talk about how he started his personal development journey, what made him do the things that he's doing now, and just an overall view into someone who decided to make a change in their life. Along with that, guys, I'm super proud of him for taking on this event. It was phenomenal, and to see him push through and persevere through so much different obstacles besides the actual obstacles out there was just inspiring. So guys, I wanted to also put out there, if you find yourself wanting to try one of these hard events, if you find yourself wanting to do something that seems like this mountain that you don't know how to tackle, call me. Reach out via DM, reach out via email, whatever it is. Guys, the easiest place is at Next in Line Development on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Let me know what I can do to help. If that's being someone who goes and does an event like this with you, or just helps you with your training or preparation, or kind of wrapping your mind around the idea of doing something, I would love to be help for you in that. Now, guys, again, make sure you're sharing the show if you got some value out of it. Thank you for tuning in, and always be prepared for whatever is next in line.